Thank you, David, and thank you all for allowing me to speak. Jennifer, I want to introduce my new secretary, Jennifer Schwichtenberg. I said, it's a good Irish name, by the way. I said, Jennifer, why don't you come to this and learn a little bit about me? So I brought her here, and when I got the invitation, I was honored, and then I go, Brad, you can relate to this, then I go, I'm getting asked to speak at the Young Professionals. So what does that make me? Obviously that makes me older than I want to admit, but I look back in my 20s, I didn't have an organization like you guys. My 30s, I didn't have an organization like you guys. So I'm proud of what you're doing, and I would just say, strive to maintain keeping this group effort going, because it's going to help you. I think professionally, obviously, but I think even more than that, it's going to help you become a stronger person. And I really don't have anything prepared. I do want us to get into some questions as soon as we can, but like most politicians, I've got the mic and you don't, and I like to speak, and hopefully you like to listen. But some of the questions that sent to me to look over and ponder, I kind of want to started thinking about my life and some of the things that I've done, and I briefly want to share a little bit about who I am, and maybe you take just a portion of that and it builds your life to be better somehow, some way. I was raised, do I have to be behind this? Can I go anywhere? Okay. I was raised in a very, what I would call, conservative family. I mean, my mom and dad are today two of my best friends. They live about a quarter mile from me. My in-laws live in between them and us. So my grandmother lives out on the farm with us, my wife's aunt and cousins. So that's good 90% of the time. It's that other 10% that gets you. But I've been very fortunate to never have to hire a babysitter with 3 kids because grandparents are there. But my mom and dad began early in life to instill certain values. And a couple of things that they taught me and my sister was the definition of right and wrong. And unfortunately, I think we could go around the room today and I could ask you how you define right and wrong, and we would get differing answers to that question. My parents defined right and wrong pretty explicitly for me, and when I did wrong, I didn't many times get a nice little talking to. I got my dad's belt. And I look at that growing up thinking, golly, I didn't know any better. And I see as I'm trying to raise kids the values that can bring. We were church going. I became a born again believer at a very young age. Church was always a part of my life. My relationship with God was always a part of my life. So we moved to this little town called Munster, Texas, which is just west of here, about 45 miles, and I had 29 people in my graduating high school class. So little old Munster, Texas. And I don't know if you've grown up or been in a small town, but the neat thing about a small town is you can be part of everything. I mean, man, I was the president of the class, I was the Honor Society president, I was president of the student council, I was president of the Spanish club, I was varsity football player, lettered 4 years, and this, that, and the other. I was part of everything. That's just how I grew up, because it was a small town, and it aided that nature. And I read a book back when I was probably, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade. Roger Staubach was my favorite football player growing up, and his book came out, First Down and Lifetime to Go. And my dad, just a brilliant man looking back, knew I was a Roger fan, bought me this book, said, son, read the book. Yes, sir. So I'm reading the book, and of course, Roger went to the Naval Academy. So 2nd grade, I'm thinking, man, I'd like to go to a service academy. I kind of wanted to go to the Naval Academy. Then we'd go on family vacation, and we used to always go camping up somewhere in Colorado. We went and visited the Air Force Academy and looked that over. So I'm approaching getting on up in my high school years, and my dad just kept challenging me. Instead of taking the same old, even though Munster didn't have the offerings that some of your schools today have, he would challenge me to think outside the box and outside the realm. You can imagine growing up in a small town, there were certain things that were popular and cool in school. You had to be an athlete. Really wasn't a choice in the matter. You had to take ag and you had to take wood shop. Well, I got my first choice in life when it comes to that thing about my freshman year of high school, and I didn't take ag. I took theater arts, and I got made fun of and this, that, and the other. And the next year I didn't take ag again. I took mechanical drawing to try to round out a pretty nice education. Got the fortunate opportunity to sit down in front of my congressman at the time, Charles Stenholm, and he said, "You got 10 minutes to convince me why I should send you to West Point." And evidently I convinced him why he should send me to West Point. At least that's what I thought. I gave him this dynamic speech, and I thought he loved it. And I didn't hear anything. This was probably the fall of 1986, my senior year in high school. Didn't hear anything until April. I'd already had a dorm room laid on at Texas Tech. I had a job lined up. I was going to try out for the football team, the whole 9 yards. And about April 23rd, 1987, I get a call from Congressman Stenholm. He called me at the school. He said, "Congratulations, Drew, you're going to West Point." And I thought, wow, what an opportunity. What an opportunity. So I get up to West Point, and we'll talk West Point stories all day if you really want to know about all that. But it's not a fun place. I hated it. It's a great place to be from. We'll get into that a little later. But I hated West Point. And I hated it because I was homesick. I could take the hazing, I could take the yelling, I could take the going without food, I could take all the stuff that's associated with that. But I was homesick. The longest I'd been away from my mom and dad and my family and my town was probably about 7 days at church camp. So I get up there and I'm just completely a fish out of water. Started to teach me adaptability. Because I got up there and I had a slow Texas drawl. And at West Point, you've got to memorize a lot of stuff. You've got to memorize the front page of the New York Times every morning as a plebe. You've got to memorize the sports page of the New York Times. You've got all this knowledge that you have to learn that any upperclassman can go up to you and say, "How's the cow?" "Sir, the cow's fine. She walks, she talks, she's full of chalk. The lacteal fluid of the bovine species is." So you have to know all this stuff, and the slower I would talk, the madder they would get. But it was a timing issue, and I knew sooner or later we were going to have to go somewhere, so I started to adapt. So everything you do at West Point and your Army career following that is based on your class rank. And I just went back, I guess 2 years ago for my 20th year reunion, and we got to comparing SAT scores with some of my classmates. And I think I'm the lowest ranking SAT graduate of West Point in my class. I got in, believe it or not, with a 1030 on the SAT. Now, this is pre-new SAT. This is the old days where the 1800 was the perfect score. Had several classmates made perfect 1800s on the SAT. I couldn't spell calculus. We're up there, I've probably been there for about 3 weeks, scared to death, missing mom and dad, and we get this honor class. A cadet will not lie, steal, or cheat, or tolerate those that do. West Point's the only service academy that adds that last part, or tolerate those that do. So we just had this great honor indoctrination, so everybody's scared to death, and we marched down to Eisenhower Hall, which is a big auditorium, and we're going to take placement tests. So this was a calculus placement test, and they had issued us a Hewlett-Packard 15C calculator, scientific calculator, which I had never seen in my life. And we're sitting person, empty chair, through this big auditorium. There's about, I think our class started out, call it 3,000 people. Graduated 902. So I'm sitting there and I can't turn the calculator on. I literally cannot turn this calculator on. So I lean over to the guy to my right and I say, "How do you turn this on?" "I can't talk to you, duty, honor, country." And I'm like, come on. Finally get it turned on, but then I can't use it. So needless to say, I didn't do very well in calculus. I failed calculus twice at West Point. Unlike many other schools, if you fail a class, you have to go before an academic board and plead your case and basically beg them to keep you. And I had to do that 2 years in a row. Your first year at West Point, you don't get a lot of time off. That next summer, after plebe year, you get about 3 weeks, unless you go to summer school. So I gave my time off to go to summer school, to stay there. And it was just a really, really tough experience for me. But thankfully, I graduated in the top 763 out of 902, so I'm very proud of that fact. West Point continued to reinforce what my mom and dad started. Work ethic, perseverance, right and wrong, integrity, character, honor, things that many times we banter around but don't really put good solid foodstuffs into it. One of the questions was to talk about a mistake you've made that you've learned from and you've turned life around. And I'll change the question. I'll just give you an experience and something that I did that I don't know I would define as a mistake, but looking back, I would have done it differently. So I got to choose at West Point, because I was so high in my class, I got to choose all the branches of the Army that were left because you do everything by class rank, and I chose the infantry because I want to be with people. Forget the machines, I want to be with people. The reality is all the good branches were gone and the infantry was left, so I chose the infantry. So if you're going to be an infantry officer, you've got to go to certain schools when you get out of West Point. So I went to my officer basic course. And I started to figure out that, you know what, in the real world, they really don't care what you made on the SAT or how well you did in thermofluid dynamics or calculus 4. What they care about is how you handle people and how you handle yourself. And very quickly, at officer basic course, I was able to rise to the top. And even amongst a lot of good leaders there, I saw myself rise to the top. So I thought, well, this is good. Got some great honors in officer basic course, so I'm flying pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. My wife never lets me forget this. We weren't married at the time, but we were engaged. And once again, when you pick your post where you're going to go to be assigned, it's done by class rank. Of course, the top guy in the class always picks the airborne unit in Vicenza, Italy. And then when they get down to me, it's whatever's left. And my wife now, girlfriend at the time, I called her a couple of days prior to us picking post. And I said, if you had a choice, I don't know where this relationship's going, but if you had a choice, where would you like to go? Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is an armor post, not a good place for an infantryman. Or I could go to Korea, 18-month unaccompanied tour, or I can go to Germany. Of course, she said, Germany. So I choose Germany. This was a time period in the Army when they were drawing down the forces in Germany, so it really wasn't a good assignment as far as your Army career went, but it was Germany. So we subsequently get engaged later on. I'm in officer basic course, and I write this flowery letter to the division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division in Fort Hood, Texas. And I told him how great I was going to make him an officer, 2nd lieutenant. I just wanted to come home to Texas. And that guy got my orders changed. So now I'm not going from Germany, I'm going to Fort Hood, Texas. I'm ecstatic because I just want to get back to Texas. Been in New York for 4 years and now I'm in Georgia. I just want to come home. So I called my fiance now and I said, this was right before Christmas of 1991. I said, honey, I've got great news. We're going to Killeen, Texas. And she to this day will not let me live that down. We got to spend 4 glorious years in Killeen, Texas instead of Stuttgart, Germany. So I get out into the Army. I go to officer basic course. I go to airborne school, and I go to ranger school. Now, once again, if you're an infantry officer, you got to be airborne qualified, and you have to have a ranger tab. If you don't have those two things, you're going to be very, very limited in how high and how fast you get promoted as an infantry officer. And I'm telling you guys, I was kicking butt and taking names. I was in good shape. I was mentally there, and I had never failed in my life. So we're at Ranger School's divided up into 4 sections. There's the Bynum section, then there's the desert phase, which is out in El Paso. There's the mountain phase in Dahlonega, Georgia, and the swamp phase in Florida. And the Bynum phase and then the desert phase are a little longer than the other 2 phases, and you have to have 3 goes to get through Ranger School on a patrol. And I'd already had 1 go at the Bynum phase. I'm in the desert phase. I've got my 2nd go. So once again, here's Bynum. I'm burning it up. I'm good to go. I can almost cruise through this. Very, very tough, as you can imagine. You go 60 plus hours without any sleep. The sleep you do get after that 60 hours is typically limited to a couple hours. They don't feed you, so you're hungry. I can remember walking through the desert on patrol, looking over and seeing my dog that I had when I was an 8-year-old. His name was Bo, and Bo was right there with me. Different patrol out in the desert. You've seen that picture of Geronimo leaning on one knee with the rifle across him. I saw Geronimo in the desert. So I'm hallucinating. And we'd been up for countless hours, and we're doing these ambushes, and we just had this sadistic ranger instructor. He was just dogging us. And I had been the platoon sergeant, very stressful situation at the time. So we had a change of mission, so I'm the guy that's just kind of Joe the soldier, and I'm just trying to do what I'm supposed to do. And I remember doing this ambush, and I'm climbing up this hill, and I just fall face down. I wrapped up in some barbed wire, and I just fell straight down. Well, my ranger buddy wakes me up about 10 minutes later, says, come on, and I don't have my weapon. If you lose your weapon in the Army, especially in the infantry, that's not a good thing. So we're doing these ambushes, and I see my weapon, and the ranger instructor was using a pickup truck to go down the road, and he opened the door, and the dome light comes on, and I see my rifle in there. So I'm like, well, I got to go own this. It's not going to be pretty, but I got to go get my weapon back. So I go down there, and he's just dogging me, and all his other ranger instructor buddies come up, and they're just dogging me. And he said, you fell asleep. And I said, yes, I did. He said, you fell asleep on purpose. I said, no, I didn't. He said, you're a liar. He didn't quite, he dressed it up a little bit, put some adjectives in there. And I snapped. You can call me any name in the book, I really don't care, but don't question my integrity. And he called me a liar. And I reached back to Arkansas, and I let it go, and I hit him right there and broke his nose, and blood's everywhere. Not a good thing to do. Not a really good thing to do. So they dogged me for about 4 more days. We get back into Fort Bliss, and I go before the battalion commander, this board. Typically in Ranger School, if you fail a phase, they'll recycle you, so you get to do it over again. They bring me in front of this board, and this lieutenant colonel is sitting there, and I notice his ring, so I know he's a grad, so he's going to love my story, right? Question my integrity, colonel's going to get it, I'm going to get recycled. No, he kicks me out, called SOR. It's kind of like dead on arrival. I got kicked out of Ranger School. But sir, can I recycle? Nope. But sir, it was questioning my honor, my integrity. You went to the same school I did. I don't care. You hit one of my Ranger instructors. So I get booted out of Ranger School. I go to a couple other schools. I get to my first unit in the Army, and I'm the guy, I'm the stud that gets there without a Ranger tab. And I get assigned to this really bad company commander. These guys had just gotten back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm. It was one of those things where, sir, I know what you learned at West Point, but we did it for real, and we're going to show you how to do it. Tough leadership challenge for me. And what I learned through that was you got to work a little harder. You probably got to stay up a little later. You got to be a whole lot smarter than the guy next to you. You got to be yourself. You got to maintain who makes you up. But before you can do that, you got to go define that. And sometimes to define that, you got to go through the fire. I had an uncle that always told me, you've not been cold until you've been hot. Ponder that one. That's one of those, that's good over a 12-pack of beer, believe me. But I did well in the Army, despite of not having a Ranger tab. And all my buddies in the battalion would ask me, they grade you in the Army, you get an officer evaluation report, and I got all 1 blocks my entire Army career. And they're like, Bynum, how do you do it? You don't have a Ranger tab, you don't go to the officer's call, you don't go to any of the hell and farewells, you don't play the game. I said, well, fortunately, the battalion commanders that we've had and the company commanders that we've had don't want you to play the game. They want you to deliver results. And that's what it was about. And it started teaching me you don't have to change who you are to get the right results. So anyway, that was a story, that was an incident in my life that I'll never forget. I still have dreams to this day of 2 things: jumping out of an airplane and getting kicked out of Ranger School. I still have dreams about they let me back into Ranger School 20-something years later, and I got to graduate. So it's obviously made an indelible impression upon me. So I get out of the Army, went into the corporate world, started, believe it or not, at TI, right as they were making the transition with MEMC. Went from an all-male brigade of 4,000 men to an all-female workforce at TI of about 60 women. Eye-opening experience for me. Eye-opening experience for me. So anyway, I had a couple other different jobs. I remember an engineering job that I had about 2 years, and I come in and I say, I'm taking another job. I'm going to go do this consulting gig up in Canada, and I'll never forget this guy. He was one of these people that, he signed on for the company, and he was going to be there for 30 years, and he got the gold watch. That was his goal in life, and he looked at me and said, you've had a lot of jobs. That should be worrisome. I said, why should it be worrisome? The more jobs I get, the better person I'm going to become. And he just looked at me and said, you don't get it, do you? You're not going to be hireable if you keep moving around. Guys, I never look at life that way. My philosophy is I was looking for a job when I found this one. Why in the heck did I get into politics? A buddy of mine, classmate of mine, probably my best friend in the world, he and I would have long conversations about, changing the world. And we would talk politics, and we would talk, how do we really get things done? And I remember calling him the summer of 2005. We were talking about something, and he challenged me. He said, well, Drue, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you change it? I said, well, let me think on that. Let me pray on that a little bit. One of the things my dad always tried to teach me is you can't impact the world. You can't impact the state. You can have an impact with the people that you're around. So I said, I want to run for something. I want to try to make a difference. So I looked at the position of county judge. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have loved to run for governor or U.S. representative or something of that nature. But I felt like I could make a difference here in Grayson County. So fortunately, got elected to the position and have really had to rethink a lot of leadership qualities. I'm in probably the toughest leadership job I've ever had in my life. Everybody thinks that the county judge is the head honcho in the county. Texas statute says he is the chief elected official. Do you know how many people work directly for me? One. Yet I work with other elected officials on the commissioner's court, and the leadership challenge is I can't say, Dave, you got to go do. I can say, Jennifer, go do, but I've got to try to persuade Dave to go do. Probably the biggest challenge, I think, for politicians is, do you make decisions based on getting elected the next time around, or do you make decisions based on what your heart feels like or what your constituency tells you to do? Because remember, we're a representative style of government. You elect me. I should speak for you. Now there's a balance there. Perhaps you don't have information, and we politicians try to trade this off probably too much, but trying to make decisions based on what's right for Grayson County versus getting reelected. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's not tough. It's extremely tough. I feel like I've made most of my decisions based on the good of the county and not getting me reelected. I don't know if you remember, but early on in my career here, we were chasing this group called MD Helicopters. We were 2 of 67 airports in the United States of America that got down to the short list. And we weren't even on the list to begin with, out of that 67. I had some buddies of mine that helped through relationships and network figure out who the company was. The CEO of the company was an Air Force Academy graduate, so we kind of did that ring thing. We got in there, and we got narrowed down from 2 out of 67. And I remember taking Miss Tilton to dinner one night in Dallas, and she said, "Drue, tell me what you want to do politically." And I've always had the dream of being governor of Texas. Grew up wanting to, believe it or not, to be the governor of Texas. And I told her, I said, "Lynn, I want to be the governor of Texas." And she said, "Okay, why?" She said, you're doing good things where you are. Why don't you just stay there?" I said, "Well, I think I could make an indelible impression on the state of Texas." And she said, "I'll write you a check for $1 million. Wow. "But I'm going to expect something." I said, "No, that's not how Drue plays this game. You send me a donation for my campaign, you're not buying me, you're hopefully supporting me." She said, "It doesn't work that way at that level. If I write you a check for $1 million, I'm going to expect something." So we kind of argued and bantered about that, and I'm driving home that evening, and I go, wow, do I really want to go to that next level? Am I strong enough, or my scruples, would they remain intact if somebody offered me $1 million to do something? Because she also said, we've all got a price. And of course I said, not me, not me. She said, we've all got a price, you just hadn't hit your price yet. I said, golly, surely not, surely not. So I got to thinking though, I think I'm making a difference here. I think I'm making decisions based on my heart and what you want. I think the county's going in a terrific direction. I'm happy, I'm living the dream. Why do I want to do anything else? So I don't have aspirations, believe it or not, and I get asked nearly every day, when are you going to run for this, when are you going to run for that? I just want to be your county judge. Of course, having 3 kids and a wife of 20 plus years and 2 other businesses kind of keep me busy as well. But I'll leave you with this, and then hopefully we'll have time for a few questions. I think to be an effective leader, and some of you have heard my spiel on this, but to be an effective leader, you've got to learn how to manage people's consequences. What's good for him may not be the same for her. I mean, you do it with your kids. As those of you that have kids, you tend to figure that out. And I think the challenge gets to be, why don't you do it with your workers or people working for you or with you, is you manage their consequences. That's not always the easiest thing to do. I think you've got to stay true to yourself, but before, and that's one of those political cliches, kind of like love and friendship. How do you define those? I don't think you can stay true to yourself until you've figured out who you are. So that's my nugget of knowledge for you, but I really would love to entertain some questions. So
I have a question about the airport. I think a lot of people may not be fully aware of what was going on out there the last few years since you've been judge. Do you have any statistics off the bat as to how many employees worked out there, say, when you first started versus now, and how many businesses are there versus now?
how many of you have ever been out to our airport, our tiny little big airport? We have 2 9,000-foot runways. The second one's just under 9,000 feet. But we can land any plane in the world at that airport consistently. So it's once again, the old adage, it's the diamond in the rough. And when I came in, it was a challenge because my question was, who's polishing the diamond? It's sitting out there, and I agree it's a great asset. So when I take over, we had probably half of the hangars on the east side of the airport were either empty or being used as storage. Somebody may come in and just want to store something out there. And I tried to begin to change the mentality. It's okay to let a hangar sit empty. It's really okay. Let's not give up a 40-year lease for somebody to store boxes and books in there. So at the time we had an airport board, which I would argue perhaps in many instances was that they did some really good work, but it wasn't globally focused. And I tried to start presenting the fact that we're not competing against, Sherman's not competing against Denison. We collectively are competing literally against the world. I mean, we're considered North Texas. We've got this Texas state of ours is the 6th largest economy in the world. So the mentality was, it's okay to let a hangar sit empty, but let's fill it up with somebody who wants to bring a job and put people to work. And I don't know the number on employees. I do know that we don't have a single hangar that's empty on the east side of the airport, and those are all full with people that are actually employing other people. We've had our tower open now for 3 or 4 years. We've spent probably about $2 million worth of improvements at the county level. That was matched by, gosh, probably the equivalent of $25 million of TxDOT aviation money. We're building a new hangar, our first new project on the west side of the airport. So I'm ecstatic about where the airport is going. But it's obviously with Caterpillar being right across the street from us, we're in discussions with them. I want their corporate planes to be here. And, you know, believe it or not, you knock on the door enough times, or, you know, they either open the door to tell you to get lost or come on in and have a conversation. And we're having some conversations with them. So it's good. I'm very, very excited about it. What else?
Was the decision to move back to Grayson County with your wife a difficult one? Did y'all consider any other place to raise your family?
It really wasn't. You know, her family is from here. I wanted to get in the cattle business. Her grandfather and great uncle made me a really good deal. So it really wasn't. Unfortunately, I had some really good job offers. They were in places like Pittsburgh. You know, as a Dallas Cowboy fan, you can't live in Pittsburgh. So it really wasn't. It wasn't that difficult. I think the difficult was because I got back up here and I was probably 28 years old. We hadn't started a family yet. It was just she and I, and you know, when you're young and naive, nothing bothers you, and if this doesn't pan out, we'll go do something else. Then the kids came along, and then I started looking, and one of the reasons I ran for county judge, and one of the reasons that I'm passionate about economic development, is I want my kids to be able to come back here. And I really don't care if they're trash truck drivers or brain surgeons, but I'd like them to have a job here. So the challenge for me now is, what do we do to grow this county? Because I want my kids to live here. I don't necessarily want them living next door to me, but I want them here close. So it really wasn't a difficult decision to come back up here. I always figured I could go to Dallas if I had to get work, but it's worked out well for me.
Any other questions? It's getting close to 1. So
Hey, thank you all very, very much for allowing me to come and present to you.
Judge Bynum, we have a certificate for you, and also,
Thank you.
in honor of your presentation today, the Young Professionals is making a donation to the Children's Advocacy Center. For those of you who don't know, they're expanding their facility, and they're going to have a kids' art wall, and some of the artwork will be framed in your honor. So
Very
I hope
good.
you'll get to
Thank
go
you.
by there and take a look at it.
Thank you. Thank you.